Hello everyone and welcome to another Premier Injuries Daily Roundup. Of course, weekend 25 has been and gone. I will address the elephant in the room, Newcastle United and that Carabao Cup final performance. Unfortunate on a day, probably lacked that little bit of quality, that little bit of cutting edge, and dare I say, Manchester United overall, I think they played and managed the game very well and deserved the win. So there we go. The defeat, however, was marred by the loss of Bruno Guimaraes. Picked up a bit of an ankle knock in that first half. That was exacerbated when his studs got caught in the second half around about that hour mark. He did manage to play on until I think it was around the 79th minute, but struggled throughout. It was an obvious discomfort as he came off and post-match. Now, we have seen a similar type of injury for Bruno in the past, I think namely against Fulham, where he was forced off at halftime. Now, initially, it was reported that he'd be out for 2 to 3 weeks, but after some intensive treatment, very little on the training pitches, but intensive treatment, he did make the matchday squad in that next game. Now, for Newcastle, we're on the early kickoff next Saturday against Manchester City. It's a big ask. Based on what we know, of course, he'd be evaluated and scanned over the next 24 to 48 hours, but it didn't look great. On the plus side, we did see the return of Joe Willock from that recent hamstring problem, or he didn't look 100%. And of course, Joe Linton was involved. For Manchester United, Marcus Rashford was cleared after picking up that knock against Barcelona. But there were two other updates. Firstly, from Christian Eriksen. He was talking to Sky Sports with regards to his recovery from that ankle problem that he picked up in the FA Cup from that challenge by Andy Carroll. He has been on crutches and in a boot. Crutches are now gone. He's hoping that he'll come out of his protective boot later on this week. And from that point, he can gradually begin to progress from his recovery. Now, initially where we're looking at maybe the end of April to early May for that. But as always, the caveat with long-term injuries, there is no guarantee. So fingers crossed. And a blast from the past, Phil Jones was also on commentary and he was interviewed about his absence. He didn't allude to this precise nature, the specific details of the problem, but he is working hard with regards to return, and he still maintains that he wants to come back and play football for United. Obviously, very little game time over the last few seasons for the Manchester United defender. This week, we have a host of FA Cup fixtures and also Premier League fixtures. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for updates on those. Of course, you've got the premierinjuries.com table and also the Twitter feed. You can post a question to myself or Jason with regards to updates on that. Now, we have heard from a couple of managers. Brendan Rodgers spoke ahead of Leicester's game. Youri Tielemans came off the bench on Saturday. Awkward landing, rolled that ankle, didn't look great. Again, left the stadium on crutches with his leg and a protective cast. He did manage to stay out the game, but that was namely due to the fact that the Foxes had already made all of their substitutes. So he played through the pain barrier with that. Now, he has been sent for a scan today, which is Monday. We're waiting for the results of that. But suffice to say, I'd be very, very surprised if he made this game or the next, and it could be a few weeks, but fingers crossed. Quick update on Johnny Evans. He did rejoin the first team in training this week, but it's hoped that he'll play for the under-21s first. And of course, James Maddison missed out at the weekend, but that wasn't related to that knee problem. He had passed a late fitness test. That was due to illness. So there's a good chance of him being involved. For Fulham, Alexander Mitrovic was absent against that Wolves, against the game against Wolves. However, he has been cleared to play in the FA Cup. So that's good news on that front. For Manchester City, Pep will assess Aymeric Laporte in training, which was scheduled for after the press conference. Kevin De Bruyne is still feeling the after effects of his illness, but he is in a much better place with regards to that. Elsewhere in the Premier League, there was a couple of little incidents down at West Ham. The big one was Fabianski took a whack to the face. That was the left eye and went off. It closed up. A lot of bruising came up fairly quickly on that. So those concerns that there may be some structural damage in and around that eye socket, that doesn't look to be the case. So fingers crossed that's just impact. Nothing too serious, and he'll be okay for next weekend. We also seen Vladimir Sufal replaced at half-time. That was a problem with his heel. Now, typically what we know with Sifal, he's a very robust player he can tolerate. We've had a few knocks and niggles in recent times, but he has played through those. So the fact that he was forced off suggests that it may be a little bit more serious than that knock. But again, we'll wait to find out. The big talking point as well would look to be a fairly serious injury to Thiago Silva. Fingers crossed, we hope it isn't. But that was a coming together with a bit of a melee on the pitch, and Harry Kane unfortunately landed awkwardly on the veteran centre-back's leg. Now, it appeared from the mechanism that may have forced that knee inwards, that valgus, that could potentially incorporate some involvement of the MCL, maybe some meniscal or even ACL. The fact that he did try to continue, he didn't appear in a great deal of pain just immediately as he was replaced, and post-match suggests that it's hopefully, on the lesser end of the scale. If you haven't seen that short that Jason McKenna released on Sunday on the Whistle, please do check that out. Elsewhere, in and around the teams, Philip Coutinho is absent from the Villa matchday squad. That's a hamstring problem. Expectation is that could keep him out for around about a month. Also, missed the Chelsea one. Mateo Kovacic absent from the matchday squad. Really difficult to ascertain what's going on in terms of the numbers down at Chelsea. Potter makes 6 changes, whether it's tactical or whether it's injury or illness related. Well, for Kovacic this time around, it was illness, so that was enforced. Hopefully he will be back next weekend. That's it for now with your weekend roundup. We'll be back very soon. Any questions, please put them in the box below.